expressed on this radio station. Its programs and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome back to Dave and Mackie's Shiny Side Out. That's right, on Revolution.radio. Important. If you say it 3 times, people really listen. This is listener-funded radio, which means you, the listener, you're holding the purse strings. So if you like what you hear, even if you don't like what you hear, please donate. Or if you can't, which is quite possible because the times are tough, and they're going to get tougher, let me tell you, then just tell people about the station. That would be helpful. Please do that. That would be really, really good. Now, we are still talking about the utopian lands, Dave, and the Golden Age. And last week we spoke about a couple of them, like Schlaraffenland, or the land of cocaine. We talked about Utopia, which is, of course, the most common one. And in fact, when we talk about utopian lands, we use the term utopia. And in fact, there's Arcadia, which is the next one, and it's synonymous in ancient times with utopia. So the terms were sort of interchangeable, more or less, right? So Arcadia was also referred to as utopia, but in some sources there's a distinction between the two. Now, Arcadia refers to a vision of pastoralism and harmony with nature. The term is derived from the Greek province of the same name, which dates to antiquity. The province's mountainous topography and sparse population of pastoralists later caused the word Arcadia to develop into a poetic byword for an idyllic vision of unspoiled wilderness. Arcadia is a poetic shaped space associated with bountiful natural splendor and harmony. Now, before I go any further, that is what the Great Reset wants to achieve. So we're all on the same page. Not for you, not for me, unless I'm in Lotto, but for the parasites. They want to live in Arcadia, which means that the vast majority of us either doesn't have to be anymore or needs to be confined, ideally, to little cages, in prefabbed cities. And we need special permission to leave to enjoy nature. Whereas the parasites, of course, go around and live it up in nature. And again, they envision the world as a garden. This goes right back to the 19th and even earlier centuries. Cecil Rhodes had this vision. It's a vision that was also espoused by H.G. Wells in The Time Machine, to some extent, and the man, I think the Man from Tomorrow, the Man Who Slept, I can't remember. The Sleeper was called, The Sleeper, which then Woody Allen made into a movie, loosely based on H.G. Wells' novel. But that's what they see for themselves. They want to be landlords, like the old English nobility, riding on their estate and hunting foxes or whatever they do. And the vast majority of us live ideally underground, completely out of sight, right? Like the Morlocks in The Time Machine, the Eloi stay on top. Anyway, the garden is often inhabited by shepherds. Again, shepherd. We are the sheep. The parasites are the shepherds. The concept also figures in Renaissance mythology. Although commonly thought of as being in line with utopian ideals, Arcadia differs from the tradition in that it is more often specifically regarded as unattainable. Furthermore, it is seen as a lost, Edenic form of life, contrasting to the progressive nature of utopian desires. The inhabitants were often regarded as having continued to live after the manner of the Golden Age, without the pride and avarice that corrupted other regions. It is also sometimes referred to in English poetry as Arcady or Arcady, not Arcadia, but Arcady. The inhabitants of this region bear an obvious connection to the figure of the noble savage, both being regarded as living close to nature, and of course uncorrupted by civilization and virtues. In antiquity, of course, according to Greek mythology, Arcadia of Peloponnesus was the domain of Pan, a virgin wilderness home to the god of the forest and his court of dryads, nymphs, and other spirits of nature. It was one version of paradise, though only in the sense of being the abode of supernatural entities, not an afterlife for deceased mortals. Again, this was for the parasites. Greek mythology inspired the Roman poet Virgil to write his Eclogues, a series of poems set in Arcadia. Dave?
In the Renaissance, Arcadia has remained a popular artistic subject since antiquity, both in visual arts and literature. Images of beautiful nymphs frolicking in lush forests have been a frequent source of inspiration for painters and sculptors. As a result of the influence of Virgil in medieval European literature, for example, Divine Comedy, Arcadia became a symbol of pastoral simplicity. European Renaissance writers, for instance, the Spanish poet Garcilaso de la Vega, often revisited the theme, and the name came to apply to any idyllic location or paradise. Unlike the word utopia, named for Thomas More's book Utopia, Arcadia does not carry the connotation of a human civilization. Arcadia is presented as the spontaneous result of life lived naturally, uncorrupted by civilization. Of particular note, Et in Arcadia Ego by Nicholas Poussin, which has become famous both in its own right and because of its possible connection with the Gnostic histories of the Rosicrucians. In 1502, Jacopo Sannazaro published his long poem Arcadia that fixed the early modern perception of Arcadia as a lost world of idyllic bliss, remembered in regretful dirges. In the 1580s, Sir Philip Sidney circulated copies of his influential heroic romance poem, The Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia, establishing Arcadia as an icon of the Renaissance. Although the story is plentifully supplied with shepherds and other pastoral figures, the central characters of the plot are all royalty visiting the countryside.
Aha!
The Spanish playwright and poet Lope de Vega, I mean, it must be there was another Vega here. Yeah, Garcilaso de la Vega. And now we have Lope de Vega. Also published in 1598, his Arcadia, Prose and Verse, which was a bestseller for its time. Becky, do you take the quotes?
Okay. Does not the pleasantness of this place carry in itself sufficient reward for any time lost in it, or for any such danger that might ensue? Do you not see how everything conspires together to make this place a heavenly dwelling? Do you not see the grass, how in color they excel the emeralds? Do not these stately trees seem to maintain their flourishing old age, with the only happiness of their seed being closed with a continual spring? Because no beauty here should ever fade. Doth not the air breathe health with the birds, both delightful, both to the ear and eye? To daily solemnize with the sweet consent of their voices, is not every echo here a perfect music? And these fresh and delightful brooks, how slowly they slide away, as loath to leave the company of so many things united in perfection, and with how sweet a murmur they lament their forced departure. Certainly, certainly, cousin, it must needs be that some goddess this desert belongs unto, who is the soul of the soil, for neither is any less than a goddess worthy to be shrined in such a heap of pleasures, No any less than a goddess could have made it so perfect a model of the heavenly dwellings.
Hashtag great place to vacate. Now, I'm just translating it. So all of that was describing in so beautifully represented words, and it just invigorates the imagination. That's all you want to do is picture this idyllic lifestyle. I really love it, Mackie, to be honest. It's like Lewis and Clark's adventures through America. The wonderful use of English was just, it's a pleasure hearing it, to be honest. And then for them to only mention this one person, actually not mention him, say a man of little worth or mention. And that's the only time they reference this poor fellow who was just, couch surfing his way across America and eating all their food. Now, I continue with the text. Though depicted as contemporary, this pastoral form is often connected with the Golden Age. It may be suggested that its inhabitants have merely continued to live as people did in the Golden Age, and all other nations have less pleasant lives because they have allowed themselves to depart from the original simplicity. Mackie.
And this is really, again, a description of how the parasites would like to live. Again, not for the normal people, and even the poets expressed it that way. Surely, some of these poems were commissioned. What does it say here? Yeah, certainly, it must needs be that some goddess this desert belongs unto. Right? It's well beyond the reach of mortal men and women such as you and I, and that's really the entire sentiment. It's this elitism. We call it elitism in the general vernacular, but I like to think of it as parasitism, because the elites. Go on.
Oh no! In that movie about time, not enough time, running out of time, whatever that time thing is, with the clock in your wrist. You could describe their wealthy existence as that.
Oh, completely.
Never a care. That's right.
Completely.
Everything in abundance. Yes.
Yeah.
Though it was highly technical, and they were oblivious of anything outside of it.
Yes. Correct.
And the last phrase here that says that everybody else has allowed themselves to depart from the original simplicity. I think that's an amazingly powerful statement.
Yeah, and it's
our fault that we let it slip.
Exactly.
Yes.
It puts it on us.
Yes.
And this is actually the theme. Before we go on, this is the theme for all golden ages and all utopias, all Edens. In mythology, we did something wrong or were punished for something or whatever it might have been.
Yeah. Thrown out of the Garden of Eden, blah blah blah.
Boom.
That's
yeah,
right.
without much fanfare, and boom, off we go. So there's even here and in this, it must be a racial memory, okay, where we are punished for something
that we
that
did. It was so
awful. But I think it wasn't awful. What I think was we, again, look, this goes very far now into the whole subject of interventionism and are we really who we think we are, or are we in fact created for a certain purpose and then we overstepped our line, Dave? What do you think?
I even have a recollection of being kicked out of Sunday school for asking too many questions. I wasn't content with just being there and enjoying it for what it was. I had to ask questions, Becky.
Exactly. And it's interesting that you should raise that, because it was the Eden, but not just Eden, but Prometheus has a similar narrative there as well. We were punished for knowing stuff or wanting to know stuff.
Yeah. Knowledge,
right? And then, forgetting that, and then we're kicked out to make sure we don't get immortality, right? But it is this thirst. Maybe that's what went wrong with our engineering. Maybe that's where it completely missed the mark, when the entities that are potentially responsible for our existence gave us, maybe accidentally, a curious mind.
See, so if you've got a worker that doesn't ask any questions, that just does the do, great, fantastic.
I know.
But someone goes, oh, can you make him just a little bit smarter? I really would recommend against doing that. Oh, no, don't do it. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't fine.
Oh, exactly. And it's funny, it was even echoed in modern popular culture when in Star Wars they created a clone army.
Mm-hmm.
And the original person, on whom all clones were based upon.
The New Zealand fellow, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. He asked Jango Fett in the story. Jango Fett asked for one clone to be altered, who then became Boba Fett, his
Yes.
son. I mean himself, but his adopted son.
Mm-hmm.
So Jango Fett and Boba Fett are unaltered, but the others were all altered to be the perfect soldiers. To your point, Dave, to not ask any questions, follow orders, and just have enough initiative to be useful in the battle. I would think.
That's right.
But it is clear that we were from the start a thorn, and let's just call them Anunnaki for want of a better word, because we made too much noise, and
That's right.
there were too many of us, and all kinds of things. So they gave us I think it was called the Shurup disease, which was kind of like the flu or the cold. And but we complained about it, and then they said, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done this. And then, of course, there was the flood to get rid of us altogether.
Yes.
And I think that has to do, and this is like a I think this is when the myths sort of get mixed up. I think the flood and the Tower of Babel. I think the Tower of Babel is the reason for the flood.
Yes.
We did something, and maybe it was trying to build. Because the funny thing is these days, we found evidence that there's something funny going on in the atmosphere, right? If you follow Skinwalker Ranch, you know what I'm talking about. Not that far off the ground, enough. I mean, tall enough for you can't jump there, but you could build a tall tower to get there, right? If you really wanted to. And then
I see what you're saying. Maybe we build a tower up to the portal.
Yeah. Hey, who knows, right? I mean, it's certainly possible. And then, as punishment, and again, I believe that it was telepathy that connected us back then.
Because we spoke one language.
One language. And again, telepathy, perfect communication. And again, if you look at the ancient texts, the cuneiform texts, they all start when someone speaks and he made himself heard.
That's right.
And so in my mind, this means that if I, let's say I were telepathically able to communicate. Now, obviously, I wouldn't want to spray anyone with my thoughts, right? Mm-hmm. Now, there could be two meanings. Number one, I direct my communications at someone that could be making himself heard, or for special occasions, maybe ceremonial occasions, or who knows what, they might have used their voices. Mm-hmm. They may have actually spoken in special circumstances, right, making himself heard. And I believe that we had that faculty as well. We lived a lot longer. We had telepathy. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on, and that's
of it.
Right. And that was the golden age, and this is why we're talking about it here as well. This is why this is sort of part and parcel of the discussion, because it goes so much deeper, and we have this memory. But the funny thing is this, and if we look at the golden age in the context of the dreaming or the dream time the Aboriginals talk about, it is not a place or a time in the past or the future or anywhere in particular. It is a constant now. We just have lost access to it. Now, again, if you think about this in the context of the UAPs and UFOs and all that, and the portals disappearing in and out of existence, as far as we can tell, right, zipping in and out, they're going somewhere. Obviously, they're going somewhere. The white gold powder, when you heat it to a certain temperature,
rearranged monotopic elements.
That's correct. The Ormies, they disappear.
That's right.
They actually disappear. First, they lose mass or weight, let's call it, and then they disappear. Again, the question is where to, and we have these things as well. I mean, we all have it where something just seems to disappear, and we have the stories by David Paulides that people seem to slip in and out of reality somewhere. These portals seem to be a thing, and I just wonder if there were a place of supreme contentment and happiness where we could dwell in peace and harmony, but we have lost access to it for whatever reason.
Except
and now we
possibly
can only
when we're sleeping.
bingo, right? And at that point, I think we can roam free. And I think I went to it once in my dreams, and I still remember it vividly. This was probably 20 years ago. I had this dream, but I remember it like it was yesterday. It felt realer than my life when I was dreaming it, and even now, remembering it, felt much more real than this. It's very strange. The sun on my skin, the wind, the smell, the surroundings, and it wasn't fantastical at all. It was really literally just an asphalt street, sort of like I guess a rural setting, and there's a couple of workmen with sort of balloon hats and overalls at a very like an old or funny looking truck, like the truck from the 30s and 40s, like really big and bulgy and all that. And that's what I saw, but I can't explain to you just how right everything felt. Like, anyway.
There are people talking about this right now, saying from when you wake up, there's a reason why you don't remember it.
Yeah.
And that's why you should write it down. If you ever want to remember anything that you've just been dreaming about, you need to write it down immediately, because we're designed not to remember it.
100%. 100%. But let's finish off. This is important though. This is because that's the discussion, and we're going to have this discussion at the end of this of the paper as well. The paper. Listen to us at the end of the paper. Arcadia, the 16th century Italian explorer Giovanni da Verrazzano applied the name Arcadia to the entire North American Atlantic coast of Virginia, north of Virginia. In time, this mutated to Acadia. The Dictionary of Canadian Biography says Arcadia, the name Verrazzano gave to Maryland or Virginia on account of the beauty of the trees, made its first cartographical appearance in the 1548 Gastaldo map, and is the only name on that map to survive in Canadian usage. In the 17th century, Champlain fixed its present orthography with the R omitted, so it's Arcadia. And Ganong has shown its gradual progress northwards in a succession of maps for its resting place in the Atlantic provinces. Revival of Mi'kmaq language, which is the native people there, has provided strong reason to believe that Verrazzano was informed by the name the Mi'kmaq gave to this place. The name Acadie may be derived from the Mi'kmaq, because in their language the word Cadi means place of abundance and can be found in names such as Tracadie and Shubenacadie. Interesting how there's like a linguistic link.
Yeah, that's like the linguistic link here with the brothers that came from Egypt.
100%.
Yeah, and their use of the word Ra to describe the sun god, and the Aboriginals use Ra to describe the sunset.
Coinkydink? I don't think so.
Not so much. I watched an episode of Mad About You, so that's why I say not so much. All right, now the Peach Blossom Spring. The Peach Blossom Spring, Meki, I'm not very good with Chinese, but or Mandarin, pinyin, literally source of the peach blossoms, also translated as the record of the peach blossom, or Peach Blossom Spring Story, or the Peach Blossom Land, was a fable written by Tao Yuanming in 421 CE about a chance discovery of an ethereal utopia where the people led an ideal existence in harmony with nature, unaware of the outside world for centuries. I'll read the plot. The Peach Blossom Spring was written during a time of political instability and national disunity. The story describes how a fisherman haphazardly sailed into a river in a forest made up entirely of blossoming peach trees, where even the ground was covered by peach petals. When he reached the end of the river, or spring in some translations, the source turned out to be a grotto. Though narrow at first, he was able to squeeze through the passage, eventually reached a village with animals and peoples of all ages. The villagers were surprised to see him, but were kind and friendly. they explained that their ancestors escaped to this place during the civil unrest of the Qin dynasty, and they themselves had not left since or had contact with anyone from the outside. As a result, they had heard nothing of subsequent changes in political regimes. The fisherman was warmly received by the hospitable villagers and stayed for over a week. Upon leaving, he was informed that it was worthless to reveal this experience to the world. However, he marked his route on his way out with signs and later divulged the existence of this idyllic haven to others. They tried to find it repeatedly, but in vain. Becky.
The expression Shiwai Taoyuan, the peach spring beyond this world, has become a popular Chengyu, which is a Chinese expression, meaning an unexpectedly fantastic place off the beaten path, usually an unspoiled wilderness of great beauty. The text inspired many later poems, some music compositions, and a modern Taiwanese play turned movie, Secret Love for the Peach Blossom Spring. In some of the poems, the inhabitants of the villages were Xian, or immortals. Tao Huayan Scenic Area is a national park based on the Peach Blossom Spring located in Taoyuan County, Hunan, China. The Mulong Gardens in Maple Story are named after the land in the text. Mulong Garden is one of the Asian-themed areas in the game, even with several pandas training to become monks.
Yes, El Dorado. El Dorado, pronounced El Dorado. Spanish for the Golden One. Originally El Hombre Dorado, the Golden Man, or El Rey Dorado, the Golden King, was the term used by the Spanish Empire to describe a mythical tribal chief, Zipa, of the Muisca native people in then Spanish colonial province of Colombia, who, as an initiation rite, covered himself with gold dust and submerged in Lake Guatavita. The legends surrounding El Dorado changed over time as it went from being a man to a city to a kingdom and then finally to an empire. A second location for El Dorado was inferred from rumours which inspired several unsuccessful expeditions in the late 1500s in search of a city called Manoa on the shores of Lake Parauim. Two of the most famous of these expeditions were led by Sir Walter Raleigh. In pursuit of the legend, Spanish conquistadors and numerous others searched Colombia, Venezuela, and parts of Guyana and northern Brazil for the city and its fabulous king. In the course of these explorations, much of northern South America, including the Amazon River, was mapped. By the beginning of the 19th century, most people dismissed the existence of the city as a myth. Meki.
Muisca. The Muisca occupied the highlands of Cundinamarca and Boyaca, departments of Colombia, in two migrations from outlying lowland areas, one starting about 1270 before the Common Era, and the second between 800 and 500 before the Common Era. So, 3 to 2,500 years ago. At those times, other more ancient civilizations also flourished in the highlands. The Muisca Confederation was as advanced as the Aztec, Maya, and Inca civilizations. In the mythology of the Muisca, Minya, the gold or golden color, represents the energy contained in the trinity of Chimigagua, which constitutes the creative power of everything that exists. Chimigagua is related to Bakwe, Kusa, Chibachum, Boikcha, and Nankatako.
The tribal ceremony. The original narrative can be found in the Rambling Chronicle, that's a polite description, El Carnero of Juan Rodriguez Friel. According to Friel, the zipper of the Muisca in a ritual at Lake Guatavita near present-day Bogota was said to be covered with gold dust. Well, there's another similarity. Probably from all the people going into it, got covered in gold dust, which he then washed off in the lake while his attendants threw objects made of gold, emeralds, and precious stones into the lake, such as tunjos. In 1638, Friel, that'll do, wrote this account of the ceremony addressed to the cacique, or governor of Guatavita. The ceremony took place on the appointment of a new ruler. Before taking office, he spent some time secluded in a cave without women, forbidden to eat salt or go out during the daylight. The first journey he made was to go out to the great lagoon of Guatavita to make offerings and sacrifices to the demon which they worshipped as their god and lord. During the ceremony, which took place at the lagoon, they made a raft of rushes, embellishing and decorating it with the most attractive things they had. They put on it 4 lighted braziers in which they burned much moku, which is the incense of these natives, and also resin and many other perfumes. The lagoon was large and deep, so that a ship with high sides could sail on it, all loaded with an infinity of men and women dressed in fine plumes, golden plaques, and crowns. As soon as those on the raft began to burn incense, they also lit braziers on the shore, so that the smoke hid the light of day. At this time, they stripped the heir to his skin and anointed him with a sticky earth on which they placed gold dust, so that he was completely covered with this metal. They placed him on the raft, and at his feet they placed a great heap of gold and emeralds for him to offer to his god. In the raft with him went 4 principal subject chiefs, decked in plumes, crowns, bracelets, pendants, and earrings of all of gold. They too were naked, and each one carried his offering. When the raft reached the center of the lagoon, they raised a banner as a signal for silence. The gilded Indian then threw out all the pile of gold into the middle of the lake, and the chiefs who had accompanied him did the same on their own accounts. After this, they lowered the flag, which had remained up during the whole time of offering, and as the raft moved towards the shore, they shouted. The shouting began again with pipes, flutes, and large teams of singers and dancers. With the ceremony, the new ruler was received and was recognized as Lord and King. This is the ceremony that became the famous El Dorado, which has taken so many lives and fortunes. There is also an account titled The Quest of El Dorado by poet, priest, and historian of the conquest Juan de Castellanos, who had served under Jimenez de Quesada in his campaign against the Muisca, written in the mid-16th century but not published until 1850. Meki.
An alien Indian hailing from afar, who in the town of Quito did abide, and neighbor claimed to be of Bogota. There having come, I know not by what way, did with him speak and solemnly announce a country rich in emeralds and gold. Also among the things which them engaged, a certain king he told of, who, disrobed, upon a lake was wont aboard a raft to make oblations Os himself had seen, his regal form overspread with fragrant oil, of which was laid a coat of powdered gold, from sole of foot unto his highest brow, resplendent as the beaming of the sun. Arrivals without end, he further said, were there to make rich votive offerings of golden trinkets and of emeralds rare, and divers other of their ornaments. And worthy credence these things he affirmed. The soldiers, light of heart and well content, then dubbed him El Dorado, and his name by countless ways was spread throughout the world.
According to the Spanish historians Gonzalo Fernandez de Oviedo, 1478-1557, he went about all covered with powdered gold, as casually as it were powdered salt, for it seemed to him that to wear any other finery was less beautiful, and that to put on ornaments or arms made of gold worked by hammering, stamping, or by other means was a vulgar and common thing. In the Muisca territories, there were a number of natural locations considered sacred, including lakes, rivers, forest, and large rocks. People gathered here to perform rituals and sacrifices, mostly with gold and emeralds. Lakes were Lake Guatavita, Lake Iguacu, Lake Fuquin, Lake Tota, Sicha Lakes, Lake Tuasaka, and Lake Ubak. Meki.
Among the earliest stories was the one told on his deathbed by Juan Martinez, a captain of munitions for Spanish adventurer Diego de Ordaz, who claimed to have visited the city of Manoa. Martinez had allowed a store of gunpowder to catch fire and was condemned to death. However, his friends let him escape downriver in a canoe. Martinez then met with some local people who took him to the city. And this is an excerpt. The canoe, or the canoa, was carried down the stream, and certain of the Guaranians met at the same evening, and, having not at any time seen any Christian, nor any man of that color, they carried Martinez into the land to be wondered at, and so from town to town, until he came to the great city of Manao, the seat and residence of Inga, the emperor. The emperor, after he had beheld him, knew him to be a Christian, and caused him to be lodged in his palace, and well entertained. He was brought thither all the way blindfold, led by the Indians, until he came to the entrance of Manoa itself, and was 14 or 15 days in the passage. He avowed at his death that he entered the city at noon, and then they uncovered his face, and that he traveled all that day till night through the city, and the next day from sunrising to sunsetting ere he came to the palace of Inga. After that, Martinez had lived 7 months in Manao and began to understand the language of the country. Inga asked him whether he desired to return to his own country, or would willingly abide with him. But Martinez, not desirous to stay, obtained the favor of Inga to depart. Sorry, before I go on here, what is being described as a city that is massive. Imagine a city where you have to walk for 2 days to get through. That's a city.
Let alone 14 days.
Yeah, that's massive. Okay? So this was a very big city. And you know what the funny thing is? This was dismissed. Actually, all of these stories of the vast cities in the Amazon jungle were completely dismissed as fantasy, because by the time 100 or 150 years later, sometimes when people organized large expeditions to go in again, they didn't find anything. Now, it needs to be said here that the Amazon River changes its course very frequently. So it actually is a living river system like most, but this one is very changeable, right? So that the rivers do change quite a bit due to flooding and mudslides, etc., etc. So the rivers changed their course, and the bend that was there before might now be a strait. That's what I mean. But they didn't find anything. Now, with ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR, especially LiDAR, we find these massive structures, organized cities, roadways, it seems, outlays of buildings. And again, to the size that is being described here. I mean, we're talking metropolises of immense size. Now, what happened? What seems to have happened is that the Spaniards and other Europeans brought with them all the diseases, which wrought havoc on the local population.
Smallpox infected blankets?
Yeah, that's it. Give them more blankets. Keep nice and warm. And that's essentially what happened to the cities. Now we don't know very much about them because no one. I mean, some people made first contact, like Martinez here, right? But other than that, we don't know a lot. And yes, there were many expeditions looking for gold and whatnot, but it didn't find terribly much. Maybe looking in the wrong place. But now that we have, again, especially LiDAR, we can see where these places are, and they're huge. I mean, it looks like, yeah. And in fact, there's two factors here, right? One of course, is the black earth, the black soil that they have, which is extremely fertile, and seems to be artificially created. And the other one is ayahuasca, the psychoactive substance they take. Now, neither of those things you just make. It takes a lot of, I guess, trial and error and failure and maybe decades, if not centuries, of research and actual production to get it right. So the black earth and ayahuasca, for me, are the biggest indicators that this was a civilization, or there were civilizations here that had lasted for a long time and had a lot of knowledge. Completely gone now, unless some live in hiding, who knows. But we see now that these stories are true. And I've always maintained, and I don't know why, but I just always thought that the Amazon was a parkland. Well irrigated, and controlled, like a nice garden, if you will, right? Kind of like Singapore in a way. Maybe greener, though. I don't know why I thought that, but I always thought that. And now it seems that seems to be exactly the case. Amazon, or the Amazon basin and the Amazon jungle, seem to have been a garden. Now, completely untended now, and they were just overgrew and whatnot, right? And the civilization that maintained it is also, of course, gone. I mean, the third thing maybe is the ingenious irrigation systems they had. Okay? So I just want to bring that in here because this story, among others, were completely dismissed as fantasy.
So right? you give any place on the planet 400 years of nature reclaiming it again, and you'll find nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only thing that we have today are large concrete buildings that don't have a useful life anything greater than 100 years.
That is correct.
And they'll just be a big pile of rubble, then themselves be reclaimed by trees.
And only recently, and this is another example, only recently did we realize that Angkor Wat.
I know.
And I don't know if
to say that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
So Angkor Wat is being reclaimed by nature right now, and we can see it.
Yeah, and
it doesn't take long for that to happen.
And and only recently we realized that Angkor Wat is a lot bigger than we thought. A lot bigger, and I'm not sure that the Cambodians were aware of this either. But Angkor Wat is huge. It's not just the Angkor Wat in your mind, the temple buildings, etc. It's not just that. It's a massive complex, right? Again, LiDAR helps us see these things. It's such a fantastic. I think we should run the entire planet, including the ocean, should be scanned by LiDAR.
Yeah, that's right.
100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just wanted to say this because, again, these are not, in my mind, these are not myths or fables or fabrications. I think this Martinez actually went there and he saw this. Now, the text goes on to call this the fable of Juan Martis, and it was founded on the adventures of Juan Martin de Albujar, well known to the Spanish historians of the conquest, and who, in the expedition of Pedro de Silva in 1570, fell into the hands of the Caribs of the lower Orinoco. During the 16th and 17th centuries, Europeans, still fascinated by the New World, believed that a hidden city of immense wealth still existed. Numerous expeditions were mounted to search for this treasure, all of which ended in failure. Illustrations of El Dorado's location on maps only made matters worse, as it made some people think that the city of El Dorado's existence had been confirmed. The mythical city, so-called mythical city of El Dorado, on Lake Parime, was marked on numerous maps until its existence was disproved by Alexander von Humboldt during his Latin American expedition from 1799 to 1804.
The search for El Dorado. The earliest reference to the name El Dorado was in 1535 or 1536, before Spanish contact with the Muisca people. Between 1531 and 1538, the German conquistadors Nicholas Federmann and George von Speyer searched the Venezuelan lowlands, Colombian plateaus, Orinoco Basin, and Llanos Orientales for El Dorado. Subsequently, Philip von Hutten accompanied von Speyer on a journey 1536 to 38, in which they reached the headwaters of Rio Japura near the equator. So I still have my accent turned on. In 1541, Hutten led an exploring party of about 150 men, mostly horsemen. Well, 50-50, horse and human? No. The Coro on the coast of Venezuela in search of the Golden City. After several years of wandering, harassed by the natives and weakened by hunger and fever, he crossed the Rio Bermejo and went on with a small group of around 40 men on horseback into Los Llanos, where they engaged in battle with a large number of Amaguas, and Hutten was severely wounded. He led those of his followers who survived back to Coro in 1546. On Hutton's return, he had a travelling companion, Bartholomeus the Sixth Welser, were executed. Oh, he and his travelling companion were executed in El Tocuyo by the Spanish authorities. In 1535, Captain Anasco and Pudia were by Spanish conquistador Sebastian de Belalcazar, one of Francisco Pizarro's chief lieutenants, to discover the valley of Dorado in pursuit of the splendid riches of the Zark, or chieftain of Cundinamarca, described by a wandering Indian of Tucumga. Meki.
Very good. In 1540, Gonzalo Pizarro, everybody knows Pizarro, is actually the younger half-brother of Francisco Pizarro, the Spanish conquistador who toppled the Incan Empire in Peru. And Gonzalo was made governor of the province of Quito in northern Ecuador. Shortly after taking lead in Quito, Gonzalo learned from many of the natives of a valley far to the east, rich in both cinnamon and gold. He banded together 340 soldiers and about 4,000 natives in 1541 and led them eastward down the Rio Coca and Rio Napo. Gonzalo quit after many of the soldiers and natives had died from hunger, disease, and periodic attacks by hostile natives. He ordered Orellana to continue downstream, where he eventually made it to the Atlantic Ocean. The expedition found neither cinnamon nor gold, but Orellana is credited with discovering the Amazon River, so named because of a tribe of female warriors that attacked Orellana's men while on their voyage. Interesting, isn't it?
Oh, it sure is. Although we've got 5 minutes, I suppose.
Oh, jeez. We're not going to make it.
No, I don't think we will. All right. So
There's more.
Yeah, there is plenty
we'll
more.
share with you.
Yeah.
There's more.
So we'll catch up with this story next week.
I think the key thing here, Dave, once again, is to really listen to the local stories, the native stories, or people that were there first, people that went there and came back with stories, and of course it is dismissed as fantasy or fable or just hallucinations if subsequent expeditions find nothing. But again, we have to understand the vast size of the area, and then just like to your point, how quickly the jungle retakes everything, and it really does. I mean, it's astounding. I like to travel in Southeast Asia, which is extremely fertile and wet. It's like tropical, and things grow very fast. And I know I like to go on walking tours in Singapore. I remember there's this area I like to walk in. It's sort of near Mount Faber, and there's this property. This must be a property that was built in the 40s or 50s, I want to say, right? That's what the style of house looks like. It's like an older style house, right? So probably, like prior to World War II or just, after World War II. And clearly nobody lives there. It's sort of fallen to disrepair. But the native flora has reclaimed most of that property.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't need a machete to go in and make your way to the house.
Wow.
If you wanted to. And you can see trees that have grown with their roots on the walls and on the walkway, and the path has split. And this is only, like what, 60, 70 years, if that. I don't know, right?
It doesn't take much.
It doesn't take much. You give it a couple 100 years or longer.
Yeah,
Forget about longer.
That's right.
You're lucky to see anything, right? Even, massive structures would be, we've gone in mudslides. I mean, we've seen, I don't know if you've seen this now, not wanting to talk about climate change, but Malibu, which was just recently hit by fires and now experienced incredible mudslides. I mean, do you see how high the mud came?
Oh, yeah. There was a number of feet. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And that's because there's nothing holding it together. It's ash, and it's readily, what is it called? Hydrophobic. So it doesn't want to mix immediately with water. So it's the first to go, then all the topsoil. Mackie, we had fires in Australia, Mackie, that was so hot, it burnt the soil down 1 foot.
Yeah.
The fires burnt the soil away. Even the soil was gone. And it was left in like a sandy loam. So in California, most of all of the hills are all made of a sandy loam because it was all seafloor that's been pushed up. So anything that's there, and it's all burned away, there's just really nothing left. And you're absolutely right. It doesn't take much at all to get buried by nature, washed away by nature, grown over by nature. Even your driveway and all the roads we drive on, give it, 30 years, and you can barely see where the road was.
Yeah.
Grass just grows. Grass grows, and then it traps the dust, and then the dust builds up, and the plants go through a cycle. Well, that's the end of the show, Mickey. You can take us out.
Oh, good Lord. Thank you for listening. This has been Dave and Mickey's Shiny Side Out, and don't go anywhere. Something else is going to come up. We're going to talk to you again on Tuesday, of course, with Plato's Cave, and Thursday. We just, we just ramble. We just ramble for an hour. But if you like the rambling, then you're more than welcome. But most of all,
be safe. Oh, and by the way, follow us on Spotify, Rumble, Locals, YouTube, and Facebook.
Of course.
Do reach out to us, and if you have any ideas. And soon, no doubt, we'll have a Discord channel. But thanks for listening. We'll see you next on Tuesday and Thursday.